Jumping back in time, June Lee, completely contemporary. These photographs are from, I don't know, the last couple of years. Paul Outerbridge is 1920s. He's born, I think, 1896. Very early color photographer. So obviously you're like, it's not color, Brad. I'm like, okay, yeah, I know, thank you. But very early color photographer, comes across to the US, sets up in, I think in New York. It might have been in Boston. I think New York, though. And is making all this work, commercial work, studio work, tremendously successful, is sort of writing about color photography. At some point, somebody discovers he's also been making all this kind of like kinky, fetishy photo work. So he gets sort of like booted out of polite society, moves to Hollywood, and basically continues, making his work. Um, is slightly less famous or whatever, but still does fine. Um, this work, this picture here, I just love so much. The way that he's taken these kind of like random objects, some of which are regular things you might find, some of which are sort of strange, like abstractions, right? Like the platonic solid of this like pyramid shape. Um, right, that doesn't have any sort of specific, I don't know what that is, but then we have this like drafting triangle that's sitting on top of it with this egg sitting on top of that, with this thing behind it, which now looks just like a strange circle, but is actually a flashbulb holder from a camera. So again, right, this like bringing in, we've seen this so many times now, bringing in the idea of making the photograph or photographicness into the picture, right? The way that John Houck, the way that, oh gosh, I'm like forgetting her name on purpose. Our friend, the food photographer person, yeah, Laura Latinsky, sorry. The way that Laura Latinsky brought in photographs, the way that John Houck brought in photographs, the way that AWOL in the beginning brought in the color chart. There is this little reference to the medium itself, but then, goddamn, look at how beautifully everything is arranged, right? Like these moments of like hitting the edge right there, the light coming in here, this line down there. I mean, it's just like fantastically nailed compositionally. Just like, mm. Um, anyway, I like the picture. Did I mention that? Here's another one, right? Like very classical feeling, right? Slightly obscene a little bit. But again, 1920s, this is very like formalism in photography at that point. I mean, even before, like when we were looking at people photographic composition lecture, looking at the way that they laid things out in the frame, right? This is still before them, and still, um, if we look at this, like this early color work, I think this is 1920 something. I can't swear to it. Um, but, beautifully made, right? This like interesting sort of like reframing that's happening here, the inclusion of this like ball that's like reflecting everything, right? These like echoes of previous still life techniques, the strangeness of the giant die, um, like just beautifully, beautifully done. And the printing process he went through to make the color photographs, like incredibly difficult. So there's that. I love this one because A, the composition is beautiful, and B, you can just see through the paper to the name of I think they're like oats or something, that is under the paper that he wrapped over the box to make this solid shape to put in his composition, right? But the balance of the light and the dark, the shadow, so good. Um, Barbara Caston. So Barbara Caston is similarly interested in the sort of formal abstract arrangement of things. Obviously much more contemporary. This is in the 80s, if you couldn't tell from the color palette. But beautifully, beautifully done. And like Paul Outerbridge, like most of the people that we've looked at, she is constructing this sort of sculptural scene not for a live viewer. And that's one of the things that I think is important to think about, right? You're not making this to be seen by a person in a gallery, right? You're making it to be seen by a camera. So you are constructing a thing for the purposes of it being photographed. And so that means you have a lot more freedom, right? You only have this like singular monocular viewpoint that you need to worry about. And that means you can make your alignments very, very precise in a way that you couldn't if you or I were just standing there looking at it and that was the way that we were meant to experience the work. But again, right, the way that these like lines come into that singular point, the way that you have this like dark line here that is just sort of like blackness being reflected, the like great color on here, the fact that this, mirror, right? It's a mirror, so the only way it can get color is if it's reflecting something that has a color. So there has to be some giant ass orange thing, back over here somewhere. The fact that this thing that it touches, right, changes from being bluish to being orange means that from the angle of the mirror, it too is reflecting something orange. So there's a complexity in the way that she's making this image that I think is super compelling. In addition to it just being sort of visually, really visually pleasing, right? Like, oh man, okay, this is really too bad. The color on that has gone right out the window. Let's see if I can figure out why. Oh my God, there we go. Whew. Um, all right, there was an emergency where the color was wrong, and it is now fixed. So this beautiful green that's in here, again, if you want to go look at these slideshows, they're there without me standing here in Google Drive, so please check them out. I think there were probably some others that had similar green fuck-ups in there, so mea maxima culpa. This one, right, I think, is this the last one in there? No, there's one more. It's so good, right? Again, what does it mean? I don't know what it means, right? Like some of them have meaning, some of them don't. This just brings me joy, right? The way that you have this like subtle pinkness in here, the way that you have this like brilliant blue triangle here, this like conflagration of little pointy things up here, this incredible relationship between the triangular shape of this piece of mirror and then this triangular shape, which is just like a dowel or a string or some like straight line thing, and then two shadows being cast by it, right? The creation of this triangle here, which I will be honest, I don't really know what is making that shape. This like watered silk background that seems to shimmer and to me echoes the silverness of these other mirror forms. So Barbara Casson, someone who is extremely beautiful formally, great use of like a creative composition in the scene. Yeah, really, really stupendous. Great color, all that good stuff. Meaning, I don't know, maybe not so much. Takeshi Murata. Takeshi Murata also love. So you can see why I chose to connect across from these works to this image. Takeshi Murata is someone who is working in photography in a way that certainly for this assignment and probably for this year, you are not going to be able to, in that he is doing computational photography, meaning that everything we see in this frame is actually in a 3D rendering. So he's going out and buying, on the marketplace, 3D things that people have made, right? Some of them are more complicated and well wrought than others. Some of them sort of give away their three-dimensionality upon or renderedness, computeredness on closer inspection. Some of them don't. And then he's setting them up in these virtual, computer spaces, lighting them, making a photograph. There we get my fingers in there. Photograph of them, and then making C prints from that and putting them in galleries and et cetera, et cetera. I just think it's great. Again, there's something like the John Houck idea of the destabilization of the viewer or the camera in this, in that there was no this to see, right? So beyond even like, the way that Houck is playing with our ideas of what's in front of the camera, this completely confounds it because there was no camera to be in front of. So is this a photograph? That's an interesting question. Are these objects photographed? Right? Also an interesting question. I don't know. But, as we get to a point where you can make something completely indistinguishable from reality, right? I think these are interesting ideas to bring up, particularly within the realm of still life, where I don't need to worry about can I make a realistic person or dog or fish or whatever. He's like, this is the Cyborg, like an old VHS videotape. So again, that's where his title is coming from. Heretic, also one of the titles. Or is it in here? Yeah, right there. The Exorcist movies. You know, you have these beautiful little things here, like this like stupid Dilbert cup, right? Dilbert, who is funny. Scott Adams, fucking terrible misogynist prick. So that there, right, where it looks realistic until you look at this liquid and you're like, well, I don't know what's going on, right? The sort of like weird specificity of these objects, like why are they here together, right? Like the ketchup bottle, a coconut, a pipe, Coors Light. You know, these are not things where if you walked into a photographer's studio, you would necessarily expect to see them there as building blocks of a still life. But there they are, right? The fact that they're three-dimensional means that things like materiality are flexible. So this like solid gold banana, right, along with this iPhone. God, I mean, they're just like they're fantastically confusing. Something I don't know. I love him. Maybe you hate him, but yeah, like the way that the cow skull feels like deflated, right? It's like a soft rubber cow skull in a way. You know, the way that the iPhone feels so very, very real. You know, with that shattered glass, that like technological failure, in the same way that the VHS tapes are themselves also a representation of a technology that has kind of like gone by the wayside. Really interesting. The first time I saw some of his early work, I was just blown away. So if you have a chance, I would definitely recommend checking him out. Even though, you know, you could not make this picture right now, you would fail the assignment, and I don't know how you do it anyway. And then the last one, right? Even like you have, you know, there's like the reflection of his soft boxes and these golden apples, like, you know, just great. And this is right. This is the last shot in the slideshow, "Art in the Future," which is the title of this book over here that you cannot read because it does not exist in a physical form because it's here in this 3D model, along with a Terminator robot head on this sort of like little dais, and then these slices of orange. So going from the 1700s, where we have these assemblages of, you know, a skull and a you know, oil lamp and the quill and the parchment, to 2011, where we have again, right, the skull, and in this case the bong, I mean the pipe, and you know, some eggs, right? Those can be symbolic or maybe not. Maybe they're just what he had sitting around in his computer. And then the standing in for the parchment and quill, the book writing about art and the future. So those are some people working with still life in photography or things that are like photography. Hopefully that was interesting. You got some different ways that people are doing it, engaging with the work. We have ones that are more formal. We have ones that are more symbolic. We have some that are more theatrical, which is perhaps somewhere between the two. You know, you have no excuses if it's not exactly the way that you want, right? You have complete control over all of it. Things to think about in doing that, right? Like light, you know, camera position. If you're doing this at home, right, can you choose a spot where you will not need to clear it off the dining room table at the end of the day or in 2 hours? Can you set it up where the light is not going to change, right? So using artificial light if you can. All of these are sort of practical considerations as you're doing it, and I'll talk a little bit about them in class in the live section. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. The slideshow, again, because I know the color was wonky on a couple of them in the beginning, the slideshow is online in the Drive folder. So go ahead if you're interested in any of the photographers and look through those. There's also some more people on the website with links to their work that you can click through. So, all right, good luck.